Bonjour. Bonjour, bonjour. I'm Marie-Monique Stackel. I'm the president of the French Institute Alliance Française, and it is my pleasure to welcome you today to something that is our second iconic luncheon with Olivier Barrot. And we have today somebody quite remarkable, un enfant terrible. I like the idea of an enfant terrible because, you know, sometimes you're here and you think literature is really boring. And finally, we have somebody who is en dehors de l'épure, who is going to be outside of the norms. And Frederic Beigbeder, you have his bio on your program, so I'm not going to repeat everything that you have in the program. But look, he is truly a Renaissance man. He is a writer, an actor, a director, a literary critic, and a TV presenter. And Olivier Barrot tells me, we don't see him every day in New York because he's on BFM every day, he's on TV5, I mean, he's every day on a TV. So he is very well known in France. Everybody will greet him on the street. And of course, we cannot see all this in New York City. The Olivier Barrot, who is the epitome of the Frenchman in New York City, because he comes every month to present to us the French classic cinema, which is tonight with French Cancan. If you have nothing to do tonight, and I hope you don't, you all come to hear Olivier at 6:45. He will present the French Cancan. It's a Jean Renoir. I have never seen it, so I'm looking forward to seeing French Cancan. But today, at luncheon, after they eat a little bit of food so that they can be full of energy, they will discuss Frederic Beigbeder's life and turmoils. I like their turmoils. And we want to thank, of course, Air France and Delta, and also the wonderful water, Perrier and Leval, you're drinking. And we do hope that you come for our last iconic luncheon on April 24th with journalist Christophe Barbier. Christophe Barbier is a political analyst. He has less of a turmoil life than Frederic Beigbeder, but we hope that you all come again on April 24th. Merci beaucoup, enjoy, and we will have the discussion in a few minutes once you all have been served wonderful food that will come eventually from the kitchen. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Olivier Barrot, and I'm in charge of this discussion with Frederic, who happens to be has been a friend of mine for a few years now. And I just wanted to ask you a first question about this taste of yours, your attraction to this country where we are for the moment. And an evidence of this attraction are two of your books, amidst a few others, that are devoted to the US, to your American personalities or characters, including Orna Chaplin, to be Chaplin, Orna O'Neill, and Jerome David Salinger. And this novel of yours, this is some sort of an investigation, which was also published in English through Assouline a few years ago under another title, Manhattan's Babe. And I also refer to one of our most famous novels, which was awarded a major literary prize in France, and which is called Windows on the World, and of course which refers to 9/11. Please let us know about this attraction of yours towards the United States. When did it start? Which please emphasize the idea that your parents, at least your father, was partly American as well as French. And well, it's a part of your personality, the United States. Let's start with this particular aspect in your work and life.
Thank you, Olivier, for inviting me here, and thank you. I thank the French Institute, Alliance Française, and I want to thank my publisher, Martine Assouline, who is here. And if you don't understand French, you can read my last book in English, Manhattan's Babe, but you will have to go to the Plaza Hotel to buy it, because we don't have it here. The reason I am attracted to America is that I am 1/4 American. My grandmother was American. Her name was Grace Carthew Yorston, and she was very funny. She had a lot of humor, and she was my father's mother. So I have cousins in New York and also in the south of the United States. But that's not the only reason. Maybe the other reason is that I love American literature. I think many of my novels are very much influenced by American writers.
Like whom?
Scott Fitzgerald, for example, because I like men wearing tuxedos and drinking champagne, and also Hemingway, Salinger, and Hemingway and Salinger met in Paris on August 26, 1944, at the Ritz, at the Hotel Ritz. They had a lot of drinks together. It happened just once, and then they went back to war in Germany. So it's three of my favorite writers are American, but also living writers. I love J. McInerney, who became a friend, and Bret Easton Ellis also. I think the American literature is very, what can I say? It's a window on the world. It's a very realistic, funny, satirical literature, and for me it's a big influence. I worship many French writers. I write in French, but I was influenced, as many contemporary French writers, by American writers. So maybe when I write about New York City, it's a way to pay a tribute to these influences.
I was not only referring to writers. In one of your books, is it in Un roman français, you provide us with some sort of an extensive list of your American admirations, which includes musicians, filmmakers, journalists, writers, and it's 2 full pages of names. And, you actually know them deeply. It's not some sort of a curiosity. It's more than that. It's been a long-term friendship between them and yourself.
Yeah, I'm also a journalist, like you. I write in different newspapers and magazines in France about books. I'm a literary critic, and as a literary critic, I defend American writers a lot. That's something that the French me reprochent souvent, because I tend to defend American authors more than the French. So maybe that's another reason. The list you are mentioning was in Windows on the World. And there is a reason for that. It's because when 9/11 happened, I was very shocked by some of the French reactions. Not all of them, of course. Most of the French were horrified, as any human being should be. But some French said, oh, the Americans, they deserve it. They want to rule the world, so that's why this happened, etc. And this was made me very angry, and made me want to write about what happened that morning in the World Trade Center. So I wrote a book about that, and in that book I make a list of the American artists that I love and why I love them. And of course, many of them are movie makers. The freedom of the American artist is very important for me, and I think it's a big influence on the whole world. Some say we are colonized by American culture, but maybe there are good reasons for that. We love the American artists because they are free and because they are very much critic of their own country. So, is it a good answer?
Good enough. I'd like to make a short stop on that particular book, Windows on the World. By the way, those books are available, if you wish, after our discussion, and Frederic will be more than happy to sign them for you if you care for that. Windows on the World was some sort of a gamble, not that easy. You decided to work out an imaginary novel about what actually happened. It's the story of a guy, divorced, father of two, who happens to have breakfast with his kids on that very special day in the Windows in the World bar restaurant at the top of one of the two twin towers. It's not that easy to think of a novel out of some so very special event that had never existed so far and that will hopefully never exist any longer. How did you commit yourself in such an experimental kind of adventure? Once more, it needs some guts and self-confidence to indulge oneself into such a story, such a scheme. I think it's very special. Not so many writers actually dared to do that. Some American writers did, but not so many Europeans.
No, and at the time it was the first novel about 9/11 tragedy in the world. Well, why did I do it? Because of curiosity and compassion, and for me, a novel is always a way to humanize tragedies. You follow one character, you try to understand what this tragedy meant to one person, and it's a way to go inside this image. It's like a big event, a big image, but I wanted to follow a human being, and so that's why I did it. But then many other writers started to write about 9/11. Jonathan Safran Foer,
Don
DeLillo, Jay McInerney also, and but I think it's difficult to resist the temptation of writing about such enormous historical events. It's for a writer. It's our job to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And there has been some books about Le Bataclan in Paris now, and I think it's a good thing that fiction can describe what is not describable, what is impossible to describe. It's a challenge. I don't know if I succeeded. I don't know. But I think we have to do that, Tom Wolfe said, if you're not writing about reality, then you're not a novelist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This book illustrates the big difference between the American and the French approaches, as far as I would say the world and the topics are concerned. I mean that I know not of any American writer who has so far written about what took place in Paris 3 or 4 years ago, whereas we felt committed in what actually happened here on 9/11. I would say the reciprocity is not true, and this illustrates a wider problem or wider situation, which is that, as far as we're concerned, Europeans and French people, were devastatingly attracted to to American literature. Many American books are being translated into French, and they gain curiosity, reputation, and they sell very well as well. Whereas the other way around is not true at all. I mean, there is no particular interest for, I would say, European world literature, including French literature, in this country. And this makes a basic difference, a basic approach.
It's very sad.
It's too bad indeed. But it has been the case for years. It has always existed in this direction.
It's a problem. It's an American problem. I think if Americans don't have curiosity for the culture of the rest of the world, it's bad for them. It's sad for them. They should, of course, I think maybe things would be better in America if they were more curious of what's happening in the rest of the world, but that's my opinion. I think about 9/11, it's not an American tragedy. What's happened that morning concerns the whole world.
Sure.
The whole world. And so that's why I felt I could talk about that, or write about it.
As a citizen of the world.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It's worldwide global madness that I'm describing.
Let's get back to your actual itinerary, your own route and your activity. You just mentioned that you have been a literary critic for years, a journalist, and a writer. Your first book was published some more than 20 years ago now, and then you turned film director. Let us know about that. From the outside, it might seem quite natural that after writing, you get to filmmaking, being known that in the meantime, you've become a writer again, though you're thinking about film, because I understand that you'll be shooting a new movie before the end of this year. Let us know about that.
Well, it's not very usual. It's not usual here. I think that novelists do not become
film
directors here. But in France, there is a sort of tradition of what I think André Bazin called la caméra stylo, the camera as a pen. And it's since the Nouvelle Vague. In France, when you have a story to tell, you can write it, but you can also film it. It's like something natural. Many writers make movies in France. For me, it was more natural even than others because I worked for 10 years in advertising, so I did a lot of short films when I was a copywriter. I worked with many different directors, and I had this culture of image, of telling a story, making a storyboard and filming it and talking to the actors, etc. And also I've been a TV host for 20 years, so also I'm used to cameras everywhere, like you. And so cinema is, you can make blockbusters with superheroes, but you can also make stories with a man leaving his wife in an apartment. So that's what we prefer to do. We have no money in France, so we like to talk about love. And my first movie is called Love Lasts 3 Years. It's about a divorced man who falls in love, and so he has a terrible problem. A new problem. Every time you fall in love, it's a new problem. So it's a comedy, a romantic comedy. The second movie was more spectacular. It was about a model scout in Moscow, in Russia. He was looking for pretty girls. In this city, there are a lot of pretty girls. Like New York.
Exactly.
But easier to talk to.
You mean in Russia?
The Russian.
Yeah. Because I understand you speak Russian. No, they speak English.
I can, yeah, I can say a few words, but
The basic ones.
The important
I think
ones.
we can figure out which ones.
Anyway, so the difference I would say between cinema and literature is that literature you are all by yourself. You are really very lonely for many months and years. You are totally lonely. And cinema is you make it with like 50 or 80 people helping you to tell your story. So it's more comfortable, I think, cinema. And I've noticed that when I write a book, I open my eyes and I spy on everyone to find ideas for the book. When I write a movie, I close my eyes and I imagine a screen and what's happening on the screen. So it's a difference I've noticed. When you write cinema, you close your eyes. Strange.
A word about this book of yours, which I once more I like very, very much, about Ona O'Neill, Eugene O'Neill's daughter, and a flirt, just a flirt, Jerome David Salinger, who took part in the débarquement, D-Day, in June 1944 in France. They had some sort of an affair. Would it be an affair? I don't know.
I'm not sure they had sex. I'm not sure. There is no proof of that.
And no one to testify. But what you did, it's very different from your other books, and that's why I think we should make a little stop about it. It started with an investigation. You were in Cornish, New Hampshire, to try and find out the place where actually Salinger lived, because at this time he was alive. You were together with Jean-Marie Perrier, who is a very famous French photographer, fashion photographer, celebrities photographer, and very nice guy, by the way. And you get to his place, you find out the actual Salinger's house somewhere. Of course, you can't meet him, but you go deep and through his life, loves, books, and his fate, which is very, very strange. And you also investigate Ona and her friends, flapper girls, in the 40s and the 50s. And it's a very both moving and funny book, very different from your other works. And I think it's a type of investigation of, it's both a tale, it's not exactly a novel, it's a story, non-fiction story. I think it fits you perfectly. It's a genre, which is yours, which fits you perfectly. I'm not hinting that novel is not, but this particular kind of approach is really something you do perfectly.
You know, since the beginning, I've always believed that there is no boundary between fiction and non-fiction. I don't understand why there should be two lists, you know, the fiction and the non-fiction, because for me there is no difference. Everything I write about is true. I always talked about my own life and about the world around me. So my books are both. They are novels, but they are also essays. And in this particular case, the love story between Una O'Neill and J.D. Salinger, which was just a few months in 1940. It's a true story, but there is nobody left to talk about it. And in Salinger's biographies, it's three lines. So it's like an impossible job to write a novel about that. We just know they met. He fell in love. We don't know if it was
reciprocal.
Oui. And then she left to marry Charlie Chaplin. And he went to the war. That's it. That's all we know. And I tried to write 300 pages about this story.
Yeah.
So it's both true and it's all in my head. But there are few things we know. Of course, he was there on D-Day. He also met Hemingway in Paris, and then he went to free the Dachau concentration camp, and then he committed suicide came back, wrote The Catcher in the Rye, and left forever, which is very moving and interesting for a writer. As I said about 9/11, also I always want to write impossible books. I think it should be like a mission for a writer to write books that are impossible to write. You know, try to write. Well, Salinger gave an advice to a young girl once. He said, she said, how do you write? What is the secret of writing? And he said, you have to write the book that you want to read. So I always do that. I try to do that. I try to write a book that I want to read and that does not exist, that I cannot find in bookstores. So I have to write it myself.
Maybe that's what happened when you started writing your last published book, which is over here, which is hardcover, something very, very exceptional in French publishing. There is no soft cover, but it's binded. It's very,
the
very
first hardcover, I think, in France.
For years. And it's also some sort of an investigation mixed with a story, with a novel, the history of a guy and girls and all that. Let us know about what it's all about, because it's all of a sudden you realize yet that, like so many others, you would die one day. Which is too bad indeed.
Which is a scandal.
Which is too bad. You have to fight this, and this book is about that. How to fight the idea and the fact that we actually are all condemned.
I totally refuse this idea of dying. I think it's out of fashion.
Obscene.
Obscene and disgusting. So once again, I wanted to read a book about immortality. How to live forever, and I looked in every bookstore. I did find the Bible, I found Dracula, Frankenstein, I found a book called The Portrait of Dorian Gray, and another one called Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is the oldest novel ever written 4 millenniaries ago. And they all talk about how to become immortal, but it's not very scientific. I needed something more serious, so I had to write it myself again. And during 3 years, I traveled a lot to meet scientific geneticians,
Doctors,
biologists,
physicians,
who are working on human longevity. In Israel, in Austria, in Switzerland, in Paris,
in the US
in New
as well.
York, in Boston, and in San Diego, California. And then I started to write, after having met and talked to all these big scientists, I started to write a novel about a TV host that is afraid of being forgotten, which is the destiny of all TV hosts, by the way. That's very painful when you work on television, because you are very famous and the next day you leave television, you are totally forgotten. It's very violent. I'm sorry, Olivier. I'm sorry. I know it's painful. It's painful for me too.
We survive, though.
So that's why Olivier and we don't do only television. We write also, because we are hoping that books will remain, will stay, which is another lie. But
allegation.
So it's a funny reportage about immortality, and there are very serious pages about science, and also I hope the rest is more light.
It's also a funny book. Well, you'll experience this. Any questions from your side to Frederic? Yes, we'll provide you with a mic. I guess someone will do that, or should do that. No, no microphone available. Yes, here it comes.
Yes, what can you say about the general strike that took place in France this past week and will continue with actions leading up to the May 68th 50th anniversary in Paris?
Oh, I hope there will be a revolution in May. It would be so funny. I would love it. I was too young to enjoy May 68 because I was 3 years old. But from what I've heard, they were all having sex in the streets, and so.
You know what? I was there.
Yeah.
And I can testify about that.
You were
I took
there.
part in it.
No. Olivier had longer hair in those days, and flowers in the hair.
No flowers.
No.
Longer hair, probably. But it was fun indeed. It was fun. It was very strange.
So
unexpected.
I hope in 2 months there will be a
Celebrating.
movement. Yeah, there will be a big birthday of revolution. You know, the problem in France is that our president was elected after writing a book named Revolution. So in a way he's too clever. He's too clever. He has digested the revolution in his speeches. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult to fight a president that says he's a revolutionary, and in fact comes from l'ENA.
Yeah.
Nobody's
perfect.
About the strikes. Well, for me it's difficult. I live in the southwest of France, in a small village, fisherman's village called Guétari, and for me, when there are strikes, I cannot go to Paris anymore because no trains, no planes, so I am unemployed. When there are strikes, in fact, I have to stay in my beautiful paradise. So I'm not sad. I happen to like strikes because I cannot work anymore. So I have. What can I say? As a Frenchman, I'm used to strikes. For me, it doesn't. There is no change. It's like that every month. So I'm always surprised when I take a train and it leaves on time and arrives on time.
Any other questions? Yes, of course. Just a minute. We'll be providing you with a microphone.
Thank you. Where were you exactly when the towers went down? And what moment, do you remember the moment where you were inspired to write the novel?
I remember exactly like everybody else. I remember where I was. I was at my publisher's office, and somebody said there is a plane in the tower in New York, and we thought it was an accident. So we continued talking, and then 15 minutes later there was a second plane, and then everybody rushed to look at the TV screen, and it was a very, very something I will never remember, never forget. I'm sorry. But why and when did I start to write about it? I don't remember. I think, well, I always take notes on a small des carnets, mm-hmm. And I was suddenly I could not write about anything else. It's more that's the reason. When you cannot write about anything else, you are obsessed by something, then it means, for me it means, oh, my next book will be about that, because I cannot write about anything else. So I don't know if it's an answer. I was very surprised that not everybody was writing about that. For me it was, every other story was ridiculous. After 9/11, it was not possible to write about anything else. No. It's so big, it's so important. And after the weeks and months, I did not see novels about that. And I've heard that Norman Mailer here said, we cannot write about it before 10 years. We have to wait for a long time. Maybe it's right. Maybe it's right for people who live here. But when you live far away, for me, I felt it was very important to write about this. And precisely to say this is not only a tragedy for New Yorkers, it's a tragedy for all the planet.
Yes.
Would you come to live in New York and become a writer, a French New Yorker, and have your children living in America?
Well, why not? Why not? It's expensive to live here. So I need my American publisher to... Yeah, we have to talk about this. Yeah, but yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, I would love it. I would love it. In fact, with my wife, we were talking about that this morning, but more California than
East Coast.
maybe, yeah, a house in Malibu with a pool, and our children would go to school in Los Angeles, where the sun is shining all year long. Maybe it would be easier.
What else?
Thank you for taking my question. I like coming to these luncheons because I'm also a writer who is a radio host and a playwright. And it is interesting in the United States where you have to be in these different pigeonholes and do certain things, and that's all you can do. But my question is, I do write for a small French magazine. I'm one of maybe the few Americans very interested in French culture. So what would you suggest for people who you have inspired to do more when it comes to French literature and do more to write about France and the issues going on there? And I've visited enough during the strikes as well as the good times to know that there is much more than what we see on television. A man leaves his wife.
Well, first of all, I was in Barnes and Nobles yesterday, and I saw many books written by television people or cinema actors are writing a lot. Amy Poehler and Lena Dunham, and so now it's like a trend here also to be able to write in different. I mean, not only when you are a writer, you're not only a writer. You are free to do many things. How to convince Americans to have curiosity about foreign culture? If I had the answer, then I would be richer. But it's a mystery for me. I don't understand. I like to read Chinese books, Japanese writers, German writers, American, English, Spanish. For me, it's totally natural. Maybe because I'm European, we are very small countries speaking many different languages, and we have the same money. We travel in other countries all the time. For us, it's natural to be curious. If a Spanish writer does a beautiful story, I want to know it. I want to have this emotion. For me, I don't understand why Americans only read Americans or only see American movies. For me, it's sad. It's really sad, and maybe that's the reason why they finally elect somebody who is a TV host, who is, if there was more curiosity, there would be less problems here. Of course, I know that here in this room it's not the case, and in New York also. New York people are not really America, and they have discovered it last November. You can, well, the world has changed also since now the technologies of social networks, well, have changed this country more, I think, than in Europe. What we heard last week about Facebook is very frightening, because maybe Donald Trump was elected because of manipulation of the secrets of 50 million citizens of this country who were spied by a company to convince them and send them messages to convince them to not vote for Hillary Clinton. So if it's true, well, maybe that's an explanation. People should not trust anymore social networks and start gaining back their secret lives and private lives. Because if it's true, well then it's a big brother who is ruling this nation, and it's very sad.
Last question, if any.
So I would say,
yes.
Don't go on Facebook, read my books instead. Yeah, you understood the message.
Yeah. I've been fascinated by this interchange, and I would just like to say that something I have discovered is that this country is an aggressively monolingual country. The only language that seems to be making inroads in the direction of bilingual education seems to be French. I have a Japanese daughter-in-law, and my son is totally bilingual with Japanese. And they are very determinedly bringing up their children with both languages. They go to American public schools in Westchester. But this is just a huge problem in our country in terms of point of view and sensitivity to the way other countries and other cultures view things. And I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I'm so happy to have heard this interchange today.
That's it.
Well, I have one critique to make, is that we are in the French Institute Alliance Française and we are doing this in English. I'm sorry, but it's really weird. What can you answer to this? Yes. I'm sorry to be very aggressive.
There is an answer. There is an answer. Is the mission of this institution is to promote French culture to New Yorkers. And if we reduced our various talks or our various presentations to the French language, we would reduce the mission of this institution. Most of you probably speak French, but some of you might not. It's the some of you that I really want to sort of enthusiastically get on with the French culture. So that is a reason. And we do have at 6:45 Olivier Barrot today speaking in French about French Cancan, and he only speaks in French because we believe sometimes that we could have a French audience. I'm sorry, not a French audience. I'm not interested in the French people. No. I'm interested in American-speaking French, of course. And so we want to have an occasion for them to hear excellent French from our elegant Olivier Barrot. So we have both. But truly, a lot of people say to me, and like you, why isn't everything in French? And there is a reason, and I'm sticking to it.
Olivier, will you dance the French Cancan tonight?
You'll see. It's a surprise. Thank you very much.